Welcome to another episode of perSPECtive, a show where we talk to interesting people about interesting board games. I'm your host, Ryan Lieres, and I got my other co-host, Kirby, here alongside me this time.
Hello.
She had just gotten her second vaccine shot and had been kicking her butt the other day.
It was rough.
So, yes, appreciative of our guest, who we'll get to in a moment, for doing a quick reschedule here, because she was...
Thank you. It was not, you did not want to talk to
me. But, let's see, what is the latest game you played since, I guess, Wednesday? Have we played anything?
No, I think the COVID vaccine has taken away my board game capabilities for a couple of days.
Yes. But we are going to be playing this weekend, potentially Lions of Lydia, some Lawyer Up, and maybe Teotihuacan we'll get into. But yeah, let's introduce our guest. We got Ryan Courtney, the designer for Pipeline, making a second appearance on the show. Thanks for joining us, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.
So for people who haven't quite listened to the first time you were on when we talked a bit about Pipeline, do you want to give everyone kind of a rundown of what Pipeline is?
Sure. So Pipeline is sort of a mixture between a business simulator, sort of think something in the lines of like Lacerda's business simulators, like Vinos, Kanban, things like that. So it's a business simulator simulating being in the business of refining oil, and then mixed with a puzzle game. And so the puzzle game in this particular game is building out your refineries, essentially. And so you're going to be putting out a bunch of tiles, and sort of the way that you build those tiles builds your ability to refine your oil. And then you're going to go ahead and use that puzzle to help drive the business simulator that you're doing.
Yeah, and now you actually have a expansion coming out for it. Right. Emerging Markets, I believe it's called, and that should be in pre-order at Capstone. Am I right? Right now,
I believe that is up for pre-order for another week or so. Yeah, I think that just went up about a week ago.
Cool. And what new things are being added to it? What should players expect? What kind of like new challenges, things that they could add, potential replayability? What does it bring into the table?
All right, so this expansion, so we have a couple that we're working on, but this one that's being released right now is going to add more, mostly more variability into the game. And I would say that this expansion is really for folks who are already into Pipeline and they want sort of more of what Pipeline has to offer, but harder.
Sure.
So this pretty much everything in this expansion does make the game harder than before. There's not much making it easier.
And it was already a pretty heavy game as it is.
Right. So this won't add any rules overhead. So as far as like complexity, as far as rules complexity, it won't be any harder there. It won't necessarily be any harder to teach. A lot of this stuff is just going to add additional sort of puzzle elements or make parts of the game that were a certain way, make them a little bit harder.
So I guess, like, for instance, I think I saw that the valuation to upgrade from, just say, crude to low will get, I guess, harder. Like, I couldn't tell. Is it during the game it could change and get higher as you keep playing it? Is that what it would do?
So each year, so there are 3 columns for these requirements, and each year one of the columns is going to flip in order. So it's going to be left to right, and each year one flips and gets one harder. So basically the requirements, the idea is that, like, over time, the requirements on how good of quality that you need needs to improve, and there are more restrictions on that. And so you need to essentially, as far as the game goes, build longer lines throughout. So in the end, your lines that we're going to high grade by the end of the game will end up having to be 3 longer than they would have been than if you were just playing the original game itself.
Sure.
So I'm curious. I haven't played Pipeline yet, but I watched a couple videos. I've seen the game. It looks really interesting. And so my question for you, and I know you guys talked about it the first time you were on, how did you come up with this particular theme, right? So we've seen, the kind of business process games, but why pick this particular process? If you don't mind my asking again.
Yeah, so it started with the pipe tiles. And so I was like, okay, what? So yeah, I'm a first time designer at this point, or at that point. And I'm like, what type of things do people have sort of nostalgia for, or would they have some sort of already like preconceived notion for? And there are a bunch of these pipe games out there, whether it be on video games or they're like an old card game, I think, called Pipe Works, maybe. But there's a variety of these pipe games out there, and it tends to be that these pipe games come in 2 flavors. They come in either a plumbing flavor, or they come in an oil type flavor. And so I was like, I think an oil business simulator is going to match the weight of the game significantly better than, say, a toilet theme game.
Sure, that's fair.
So it was more of just aligning with sort of previous ideas or previous games that used this mechanism before.
And so we were just talking recently with the designer of Distilled, and so he based it off of like the actual distilling process. Did you? I don't remember if we asked last time. Like, did you actually do some research and like figure out and base some of the game off of like actual refinement and like what maybe the process, or I guess it would be more bigger overall rather than like small, like the actual processing refining? Or
so no, not with this game. So with this game, I did not go into and try to learn a whole lot about the refinement industry. Some games I do read up in those things. So like another game that's coming out from me this year called Barrage, which is a stock game. That game, I read a bunch of sort of different accounts of Wall Street. And then I was like, okay, how can I make something that feels like, and I wasn't reading nice accounts of Wall Street, right? I was like reading about people doing bad things. And I was like, how can I abstract that so that you, the player, can manipulate manipulate the stocks and manipulate companies in order to make a profit, and you don't really care. Like, you don't care if you bankrupt the company. You don't care about the company's fundamentals. Like, none of that matters at all. You're just going to spread rumors and move the companies to make the money.
Cool.
So that one I did read on, and I do that on some games. But for Pipeline, no, I have pretty close to zero knowledge on the refinement industry.
Gotcha. Do you have any other questions you wanted to ask?
Not right now. No. I mean, I think it like, that was what I was really curious about, because I think it's an interesting concept. I haven't seen other games about it, so I was curious kind of how you got there, and it makes sense that you started with pipes. I think a toilet flavored game would have been interesting, but you're right, probably not as suitable to being so heavy.
Right. So in the other pipe game that's been released by me, we switched it to conveyors, right? And that game is, I would say, less heavy but harder than Pipeline. And then there's a third one, and it is significantly lighter, and that one is a hiking theme. So you're actually building out hiking trails through backcountry. And so that made sense to me as well, because we're moving it to a simpler style of game. It's a little bit more relaxed, more casual. So we are bringing it into like the nature theme. So we're trying to align like them with their difficulty levels. But I could definitely see why some people would be turned off by the refinement theme.
Sure. And so the I guess the first smaller one you were talking about is why am I spacing on it?
Curious Cargo.
Yes, Curious Cargo. Thank you. It's fun because it's like it adds, yeah, like you said, conveyors, and it's a two-player only.
Correct.
Yeah, two-player only, and you just kind of taking almost just the tile laying aspect of it and trying to get the cargo from one side to the other, like through the machine out onto the either incoming or like outgoing trucks, and they're kind of like being pushed from your side onto the other player's board so that they can then take it off and score points and like score points from it. And they like the Curious Cargo. It's like these little creatures, I guess you could say, right? Yeah.
Right.
Little fun little theme that you added to it.
We tried to make the theme more whimsical. Again, we tried to package it so that it was obvious that the rules were less complex. But with that one, maybe we released it with two versions that, like, so we released it with 2 and 3 colors, and maybe we regret a little bit not releasing it with 1 and 2 colors to start, because 3 ended up being a little complex for a lot of folks, and starting at 1 and 2 might have been a nicer transition so that people can get comfortable with the game first before they start getting too smoked by the difficulty of the puzzle part. Sure. So we learn from our mistakes, and hopefully over time we'll get the games matched to people better. And then with pipelining, we did a little bit better job of, I had a game that was incredibly heavy, and then I was like, no, we're not going to release this. And so we cut a whole bunch of stuff out of it. And now with the expansions, we're starting to add some of that stuff back. And maybe one day we'll release the full original version, though I suspect it'll sell like 2 copies. And will be my mom, so I don't know if it makes economic sense for us to do so.
Sure.
But I would like to at some point.
So what got you into designing in the first place?
So I started actually in video games. So I was working on like app-based games, and then I've always sort of been interested in sort of like the tech demo-y type video games. So it was stuff on new hardware that people aren't really working with yet. I would go to like indie festivals and try different weird tech and stuff like that. So I was doing those tech demo type games, artsy type games, indie type games for digital stuff. So I was doing that already, and then I was working on some word game apps. So that's where I started, was word games. I took the word games to a local meetup of designers. Turned out that none of them were doing apps or video games at all. They were all doing board games, which was fine because I was just bringing in paper prototypes of the apps for them to test. So they were still able to test them, and they were very helpful. But I was like, oh, maybe I should try to do a board game myself. And so that's where I was like, I think I could probably do one of these business simulator style games. And there's not a whole heck of a lot of competition in that space. So, maybe that's an area that I can try and not, and sort of make a little bit of an entrance without worrying about, just having every big company out there just crush me.
Sure. And since you started as tiling, was there, when you went to like the convention or something, was there a certain tile game or like something that you were playing that you really wanted to use this as a kind of like the starting with those pipes?
So the tile laying actually came from the app side of things.
Mm-hmm.
So we were making app puzzles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we were making auto-generated content and also auto solvers, right? So that we wouldn't have to make these puzzles by hand.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were working with puzzles that were similar to, say, I don't know if you know the game Flow, but in Flow, basically you're connecting two dots of the same color, and there's multiple of these different two dots of the same color, and the way that you connect them and wind them around makes these pipes, and you have to fill up the whole grid, and they have to wiggle around each other and stuff like that. So that's sort of where the pipe idea came from, was those app puzzles for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So not board games at that point.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty cool. Very, like, so much different than any other person we've talked to about like someone designing. It's, they have the like some kind of game or mechanism that they kind of like and branch off from.
So I've tried to design based off of board games before. And of course, like I do spend time watching videos and playing board games to build up sort of a repertoire or a library of ideas that I have, or understanding of whatever popular mechanism. But I've tried to design specifically based off of, like, here's a game and, like, how can I make that game better? Or here's a board game and how can I mix that with another board game and see how it works? Yeah. And every single time I've done that, the games have been complete crap. And so, like, that's just not a skill that I currently am very good at all.
Sure.
So definitely one I should work on, to be a better designer, but I'm very, very terrible at that style of, like, take a board game and try to make that board game, try to make something similar to it, or a mixture of the two. I very rarely use board games as inspiration for the original idea. I tend to come up with an idea and then go through what I already, my library of mechanisms, and see, like, okay, would this mechanism produce this sort of feeling that I'm shooting for? And then I go from there.
Hey, I mean, start with what you know, and I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Well, and it's working.
Yeah, I mean, to make something that works, like Pipeline and Curious Cargo, and now what's this other trail one, I guess, coming out?
So I don't know if I could say the actual name, but yeah, it's a
trail game. Okay, a hiking game.
There's a hiking game,
cool.
And then Bear Raid is also coming out. That's that one is releasing, supposed to be before Christmas, but I don't know if that's getting pushed back with the whole situation of every single thing that is being shipped right now is like 20 times more expensive or whatever.
Yep.
And are you still going to do through Capstone for that?
No, so that one was through Board Game Tables. They already did the Kickstarter or whatever for that. Okay. And now it's just in the process of being fulfilled. That game is quite different. So it's a 3 to 6 player game. So it doesn't even play 2, which is my favorite player count for games, pretty much, period. There is a lot of screwing people over and collusion and lying, potentially.
Interesting.
All things that I tend not to enjoy in games.
Interesting. Okay.
I'm very much of a puzzle optimization type person when playing games, but this one, I was trying to make it feel like you were a bad person on Wall Street, and so
interesting. Okay.
You get to do all those bad behaviors.
Okay. And where did that idea originate?
So I was just reading. So this happens a lot, but I will just go onto Amazon and I'll just buy a whole bunch of nonfiction books on whatever topics. Yeah. And really, that's probably my favorite, like, pastime. I enjoy that even more than playing games. I probably should admit that, but the thing I like most is just finding some topic, some subject, and going and buying a bunch of nonfiction books that are talking about that topic. For me, it will typically be something math or science related. So Wall Street is very mathy, especially if I can find the books that actually talk about that. But some of the books that I read were just full of drama, which isn't really my favorite thing, but I was like, this is crazy, like what these people are doing. And so I was like, that would be a really cool game to try to design. And I basically had zero confidence that what I was making was actually any good because it was so outside of what I played.
Yeah.
And with that game, I designed it and I was like, okay, I want something where you could, do these bad things. And then it's sort of like a party. It's sort of like a party and economic game mix. I also do these stupid things where I mix genres that aren't supposed to be mixed together, like tile laying and economics is not really supposed to go together. Like party and economics is not really supposed to go together. So I do these stupid things, and I was like, all right, I've made this thing, and then I was embarrassed to show it to people. I was like, I don't think that this game will be like that people will enjoy this. I couldn't picture it in my head that people enjoy it. But then I was at one of these meetups, and the meetup was like, we had gone through everybody's games, including my first game like the game that I was testing. And we had some more time left. And they're like, does anybody have extra ones? And I was like, trying to be like, no, I don't. And then someone's like, we can see you have something in your bag. I was like, so then I ended up getting it out in front of people, and they ended up liking it quite a bit, to my surprise. So then I kept taking it out, and people liked it, which is also really surprising because most people in these meetups don't like my games. Like Pipeline, I would say 50% of people hated it whenever I took it to playtesting stuff, because Pipeline's really suited for a very particular audience. Right. And so here's a game that, with the Bear Raid, I was like, this game no one's going to like it. And then lots of people liked it. So I didn't know really what to do. And then, so yeah, I just kept taking it around. I was like, all right, someone's got to show me why this game sucks. And then it kept doing all right in the playtesting. And I was very confused as to what to do with that. But in the end, it seemed to work. So I was just like, all right, if people think that this is fun, then who am I? I'm not smart enough to know. I was going to throw this thing out. I was embarrassed of it. Right. And then, it turned out that folks liked it. So I don't know.
Hey, I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And,
it sounds entertaining. It really, really does. I actually really am intrigued by the fact that you've taken the party components of lying or convincing them or trying to pull one over on somebody, but also having to think economically about a game. I'm intrigued by that. I think it sounds super fun. I can totally see how there's an audience for this.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I got a little bit lucky on that one. Or I don't know, maybe I just don't know what I'm doing that well. I make lots of games, and sometimes I'm like, this one's gonna be a real banger, and it's just complete crap. And I don't know. Just the iterative process, and also just getting stuff out in front of people quickly and seeing what people actually like is definitely important, because I don't really know what I'm doing.
I mean, well, now you've had several successful games, does it still feel like that imposter syndrome almost, where you're still not quite feel like saying you don't feel like you quite know what you're doing? I
know to listen to what other people tell me. So I can't make something in my head and say this is definitely going to work 100%. And I still can't do that. I do get better at that over time. But still, there are games that I make in my head, and I start to get down onto paper or whatever, and I'm like, oh, this should be really fun. And it turns out that it's got a really good puzzle to it, or it's got a really good mathematical sort of framework to it, which is interesting to me, and maybe a handful of people, and then everybody else is like, wow, this is just super AP prone type, super thinky thing. And it just feels like I'm doing math homework. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's the point. That's why it's fun. They're like, no, that's not fun. Okay. They have to go, okay, is there any way that I could salvage this? If not, I just completely toss it and move on to another thing. So I wouldn't say that I have it figured out now, or that I'm going to ever have it figured out. I think a small amount better at it over time, but mostly it's just get stuff in front of people, as many different people as you possibly can. And I have different types of play test groups, which sort of match the different types of potential target audiences. And so I get the games out into those different play test groups, and then I try to get feedback from them, and I will move the games in whatever direction that they're telling me. So I'm willing to listen. That's the skill. Like, am I willing to listen?
It's quite a rare skill you got among like designers and stuff. People like, you just need to actually listen to what people like, understand that criticism isn't bad. It's just making you better.
Right.
Yeah. And
there's a lot of listening, I guess, where you're not even listening to what they're saying, but you're just watching how they're behaving. So it's a lot of just watching behaviors. You're thinking about what is the pacing of something, so you're paying attention to their time, like where are they getting slowed up on certain things, where are the moments where you can see that they're getting excited, or you're seeing the situations where they're getting nervous. Like you want people to have a little bit of nervousness in the games, right? You want that tension and things like that. So a lot of it is sort of viewing body language or looking at overall timing on things. So behavioral type thing. So it's not just like, what did this guy tell me? As a matter of fact, it's probably much less, what did this guy or girl tell me, than just watching, just observing, and paying a whole lot of attention to what is actually going on the table, and then saying, okay, this is working, and moving it in that sort of direction.
Absolutely.
So have you ever had anybody that you can watch their body language and you know that they're thinking one thing, or maybe they're not jiving with it, and they just give you a completely different message? Have you ever had that happen in playtesting?
As in, like, someone is clearly not having a good time?
Or even the but that would probably be it. Like, they're clearly not, and then they're like, oh no, I liked it, it was great. But you watch their body language the whole time. Oh yeah,
of course. There are people who want to be polite. I like I said, a lot of my games people do hate, which is fine, right? And so, like, when they get out, they don't want to necessarily and this is another thing that I have built up with my playtest groups, is that I feel like I've built rapport with them so that they will be honest with me, and they will not try to be nice, because being nice just gets me embarrassed once the game's published, right? So I want you to be as mean as possible and tear myself apart as much as possible, all the way up until it's published. And even when it's published, you can tear it apart too, preferably not publicly, but just give me the good information, or the best information you can, and then I will adjust the games as need be. But absolutely, especially with newer playtesters, you'll get situations where I could see, like, this person absolutely hates this game and wants out as fast as possible. Hopefully, if I see that, I'll just end the playtest earlier and let them out of that, so I don't have to force them to be miserable. Because preferably, I do want them to playtest something else that I make at some point. And because I make a broad range of games, hopefully, like, at least like 1 out of 20 of my games they do like. So I try to get them into that one, the one that they do like. But yeah, people will try to be polite because they think that being nice is polite, but it's kind of, unfortunately, not polite. It ends up getting us
in design
online.
In design, being nice is not helpful. It doesn't help. Like, most of the time, people within some kind of design outside of board games, they want to hear the critiques because they want to get better. There's some people that just want to stroke their ego, but most people want to get better and understand what is and is not working. So, being as honest as possible, if you're a reviewer, is always good than just simply being nice. And honestly, all this for people designing games listening to this is all good.
Right. Yeah. And if you have somebody who's being really mean about your design, at least for me, like, I've tried to provide them as much positive feedback, and I will bring up, like, oh, this person is doing a really good job of critiquing me, and I'll do that in front of everybody else so that everybody knows like that is something that I want.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
like sometimes somebody will say something really nasty and other people are like, oh, did they really just say that? And I'm like, good. No, this is good. Like, this is what I want to hear. And then it makes everybody else sort of feel more comfortable to also be nasty,
Yeah.
which can, it can hurt your feelings a little bit, but I mean, so what? Right? Like, I'm just a dude, right? Like, I'm wrong 99% of the time. So just go ahead and say it how it is. And then, as long as I'm not a complete moron, I'll take into account feedback and move things hopefully in a better direction.
Yeah. And all fantastic advice for anyone designing board games. And I guess kind of following on this, as we kind of going down this track, I'm curious to know, at what point do you decide to start bringing a game to playtest?
Very fast. So I try to do to follow this thing as my own made up stupid rule, but it's like get a game as soon as I put pen to paper. So not necessarily like if I'm just like mulling over very abstract or high level things like but as soon as I actually start to make a prototype, I try to get that in front of people within a week. So I give myself a very, very short time frame. That also makes me, it's another thing where it makes it so that I don't get my feelings as hurt anymore, because now I have an excuse. I'm like, oh, I only spent a week on this. That's why it sucks so bad. It's not because I'm a complete moron. So I have an escape, right? So if it's real bad, I'm like, oh yeah, what a dumb idea, and just toss it, right? So I'm not super tied to a game after a week. Yeah. And then the other thing is because I'm not a full-time designer, I have a day job, right? I don't have time to spend on going down really bad paths. Yeah. So I need to focus on and then like trying to save a game, right? Like I can understand sort of like approaching game design from like this art sort of idea, whereas like your dream like idea and you're like trying to make this one idea work. I don't really have time to do that because that might take forever or it might not ever work. And so I need to get as many ideas out in front of people as fast as possible, see the ones that show the most promise or the part of one that shows the most promise, pull that part out and start working on that thing, and then try to get the best game I can from that thing. I just don't have time to just be like, okay, I wanted to make this one passion project about this one particular thing. I'm going to make this huge world. I'm going to work on it for 10 years. And then everybody's going to say it sucks. Like, like that's not the approach that works for me. And I think in general, if you want to be a designer, that's also not a great approach. But if you want to be an artist, then, and it's really more about your personal like passion project, then maybe that's fine. But so it's sort of a different approach to the problem, I guess.
Sure. I mean, I would even say just, I don't know that anyone should really go down the path of like, I have this very big ideal of a game in my head and I want to do whatever it takes to make it. That is, I mean, it kind of applies to any sort of design based thing. Realizing that an initial idea is never something you should expect to come out with. Like, right. Things change. It's that initial idea most likely is not the best that it could be, and don't get tied so much to it.
Right. And then you also have to, I mean, it depends what your end goal is too. Like if you're trying to get your game published, then you've got to do certain things, right? It needs to have some commercial appeal, right? We're not making like a fine art piece where it's just one copy and you need to find one person to buy it. We need to find, tens of thousands of people to buy our games. And if you don't, then that game's going to be sort of not considered a success. And then publisher is not going to necessarily want to work with you again. Yeah. But if you don't care about that, like I have some games that I make that will never get published, and they're just fun for me and a very small group of my friends because they're really thinky and mathy, and they'll never get published, and I don't care. And so like those games will go down their own path.
Well, you need to send some of those to mine. I love thinky math games.
Yeah.
That's my type of game. But yeah, so on all fantastic advice for anyone getting into designing. And kind of, I want to, before we start talking about some other games, either tiling or possibly you had mentioned Time Wheel style games. I do want to just chat a little bit more about this new expansion, and it sounds like some other expansion ideas that you have coming forward for Pipeline. What is your favorite, I guess, aspect or portion of this new emerging markets one? What do you like the most, and what do you think creates the most appeal?
Right. So it's called emerging markets because the main part of this expansion is the new markets and action tiles. So that is the main change in the game as far as I'm concerned. The new upgrades, fine, right? It's just more upgrades to work with, but upgrades is only one action space on the entire game. And so like over time, you'll get to try these new upgrades and sort of go down the different paths. But that doesn't drastically necessarily change game to game, right? It's just one space. The stuff with the refinement requirements getting harder over time, that was something that was in the original game, and like I said, we're slowly introducing stuff from the original game and trying to make we're moving it slowly towards that original game. So that's not necessarily anything like super innovative or anything, but it does move the game in a direction that I prefer. I like the game when it is tighter. I don't like the game when there's so much money sort of free flowing. So this is going to tighten it even more, and it's going to make people very, very angry. But it's going to also make some people like me will like that more, because you'll have to think much more about every single dollar that you spend, not just at the beginning of the game, but also you'll have to think about that as the game progresses. The valuations definitely make you play in a new. So basically, we looked at strategies that we wanted people to do. They weren't doing as much as we wanted, and we try to support those with valuations. Okay. So we are incentivizing certain strategies, like strategies where you are mostly running low length lines. So you're doing these sort of low low value or low grade oils strategies. Strategies where you only have tanks in certain areas, so you have to be smart about how you move your oil through, instead of just being like, okay, I made the line, it's this length, and I'm just going to go and do this. That's another thing that sort of harkens back to the original game. In the original game, you actually had to pay to run your lines based off of the line's length. And so you did very much care about how long your lines were, because that cost was very important. And so the length that you built your lines was something that you really had to pay attention to. This is sort of doing that without adding that, adding the full sort of weight of having to pay for everything that you run. But yeah, the main thing is the actions, the new action spaces and the new markets. What it does is it makes your strategic pathing through the game. Also, I think it brings the puzzle, that strategic pathing, sort of on par with the puzzle of the pipes. So before, or in the original game, the puzzle is sort of in the pipes, and then you get a little bit used to, like, because every single market is symmetric, you sort of get used to, like, okay, I can normally go and do this, and then I can secondary action into this thing, and you get sort of used to the combos that you can go ahead and make. All those combos now are sort of broken. They don't exist anymore. And because the markets are so variable, you are no longer going to have have those guaranteed situations. So, and the markets are super variable. Like every single tile can get a random tile placed on top of it.
Okay.
So you can have games where a color of oil is only of crude oil only exists in one location.
Okay.
Right. So there's only one place to buy it. You can have situations where there's two places to buy it, but they're both up in crude. Right. So you might have two places you might have 16 oil that you can buy up in crude of blue, but you can't buy blue in any of the refined markets. So again, that's another thing that you have to pay attention to. So now, instead of just being like, I look at the refinement requirements, blue's a good, easy one to do. As far as the refinement requirements, okay, I'm just going to go find blue pipes and go. Yeah. Now you have to stop and you have to be like, okay, I can only buy blue here. And the markets that are buying blue, there's not really any markets that are buying blue at the mid-grade level. There's only markets buying it at low and high. So I need to make my pipes match only mid or high, or do like a two-step process to jump from low to high or whatever. And so you have to go and you have to think about your pathing all the way through now. And so it's significantly more thinky. And it's starting to add some of the traps, like some of the things that the sharper edges that you could get caught on in the original game. Now in the original game, it would really punish you for getting caught. This one, if you get caught, it's a little nicer because you can typically go and get a loan and $15 gets you back in the game in this game. But yeah, there are ways that you can get stuck. So you can get to a situation where let's say there's only two places that you can sell like mid-grade blue in the entire game. Your opponent goes and sells two mid-grade blue in front of you. You have no place to sell it at all, right? Whereas in the base game, there was always another place that you could sell, but at $5 cheaper. Right now, that thing doesn't necessarily exist anymore. So much sharper edges now that you can get caught on if you don't really think through all your pathing. It's going to make some people more AP prone, but for people, I think, who like pipeline. So this expansion is for people who like pipeline. If you don't like pipeline, this is not going to save pipeline for you or bring it back into a potentially fun game or simplify it in any ways. Like, this is going to be people who like pipeline, particularly people who play pipeline a lot and are looking for a little bit sharper teeth that they have to work through, where they can actually screw themselves if they do not plan their moves as well.
And it's kind of sounding like there's even bit more player interaction than in the case of, like, you could really like screw the player going next, because you could, like you said, sell those two blues knowing that they're going to want to sell those and really put a stop on them.
Yes. So managing turn order becomes even more important in this game. So making sure that you buy or sell in front of somebody, there may only be 6 crude blue in the entire year because there's only one location and one tile that sells that. So you may have to jump ahead in turn order, sort of messing up sort of like the smoothest path, but you may have to do that so that you go and grab all those 6, and then everybody's shut out of that oil for the rest of the year, and now you have a little bit of free reign. So you're going to have to make choices between, like risk mitigations type choices of like, okay, do I need to jump ahead here now to make these moves so that I don't get blocked by somebody else? It's definitely more interactive, but again, for people who have played pipeline and are at least mediocre at it. Like, for a brand new player, I don't know that this will make it way harder. I think I think they'll just sort of go through the motions and not really understand like the level of the combos necessary if everybody at the table is brand new. But yeah, if there's an experienced player, that experienced player probably is going to find sort of these what's it, like squeeze choke points, right? And just completely mash new players on those choke points because the new players aren't going to necessarily know that that's a choke point.
Sure. And I like listening to this. I don't. Have you played Gugong at all?
I've not played Gugong.
So there is an expansion for it. That the way you're kind of describing all this and what it's adding is very similar to that game, where it's adding some things and like building on top of what's already there, as well as making certain paths that were in the base game but weren't necessarily that viable, more viable, and actually has a chance, so you can potentially take other routes to victory. And like kind of like what you're saying with like maybe the crude oil, the low grade route now is actually possible, and you can think about different strategies. And so the expansion is almost like just sounding like it's providing more to what's already there, which is what I really like for expansions to do, instead of almost just like patching maybe something that's in the game. So I mean, from what I'm hearing, it's sounding very exciting. I like that it can be adding potential more math heavy decisions that you have to do, and some interesting choke points that you kind of have to work through and figure out how this game's going to work. And yeah, it sounds pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think it'll work for some people and won't work for others.
Yes, absolutely. So what of I don't know how much you can reveal, but what kind of other ideas you got for the new expansions for it that you got in the works?
All right, so this one, it's going to essentially be a triptych, right? So you've got the base game in the center, and it's going to make this triptych piece. So when you put them all out, it's going to make this nice image. And so it's the base and then 2 expansions. And then, like I said, there's the potential idea, and there's no guarantees of this last one, is releasing the full original game as is. The second expansion is much more towards making Pipeline maybe appeal to a newer audience. And it does make the game, I'll say easier. I'll say it makes the game easier. So you're going to have a little bit more power in the game with the second expansion. But the second expansion is also not going to add a whole bunch of new rules. So I'm not trying to like massively change the base game here or add a whole bunch of new rules. But it will give you a little bit more power, and there'll be ways for beginners or people who are not as good to essentially be given a handicapping system of some sort that will allow them to have at least a better shot of winning. So we use a handicapping system when we play, but when it's so like in your face, like, hey, I'm going to use this handicapping system, and like what in the handicapping system works really well. So like if people need a handicapping system, I still suggest using this, but you take the refinement requirements and you add +1 to them, and then based off of the level that you do, you change, like you say like, okay, I'm just going to do the first column, or you're going to do the second, like first and second column, or all columns, right? And it works really well, but unfortunately, like a lot of people's egos get involved in games, I guess. And so people will be sometimes can get offended by you doing that. So we're introducing a way to do like the handicapping system where like, okay, we're going to give you these things at the beginning, but it's not quite so like, I don't know. It doesn't feel as
punishing.
I wouldn't say punishing. So the people, it's more that the people who are not being handicapped are a little bit, sometimes can get a little offended, right? And so we're like softening like how that handicap is given to you. So you're given a thing. It's like a little bonus, but it feels like a little bonus instead of it feeling like, oh, this guy had to do like a way harder game, and he's like saying he's way better than me because he's going to do the way harder version, right? Which, yeah, it's unfortunate because using the old handicap system, or the handicap system that like Tim, the developer, and I use, is very effective. It keeps it, you can go and you can pick based off of the number of columns that you use, a pretty, it's granular enough that based off of your skill versus the other players, you can actually make the games pretty even. But, just because of, I guess, psychological reasons or whatever, like that ends up not appealing to some folks.
Yeah.
Because they feel like, they're like, oh, you don't have to treat me like I don't know, like a dummy or something. And you're like, I'm not. Like, I've just played this game 100 times.
Yeah.
Like, because I designed it or something. Like, it's not, I'm not calling you dumb at all.
Yeah.
It's just,
I
have more experience.
Exactly. Sometimes just nature of certain games. It's just the more plays you have, it's just certain things about it that aren't going to trip you up as new players will. So, yeah. Okay. Interesting. And when can people have a lookout for an announcement, I guess, for that?
Who knows? So, yeah, if there's one thing that I've learned in board games, it's that things are always getting delayed. Sure. So, like, for instance, this original expansion was supposed to come out like exactly a year after the original the base game came out. And then the second one was supposed to come out exactly 2 years after the base game came out. I don't know exactly where we're at right now, but I know that it's not 1 year away and 2 year away.
Right.
So I'm pretty sure we're at like 2+ for the first one. So yeah.
Sure. Okay. Well, so I know you kind of had mentioned you had like a secret mechanic that you wanted to share some games that you liked of, which Time Wheel. Curious to know what games you had.
So I don't have a ton of them, so we could do tile laying if that's the one that everybody knows.
Well, I'm curious to know what you had. What was the game that you really liked with the Time Wheel?
So 2 of my favorite ones are Barrage, which is the game with the water dams.
Yep.
Right, and it has the wheel, and then whenever you pay to do an action, you have your workers tied up in that wheel. And all these games typically also have a way to manipulate time so that you don't actually have to wait as long. So Barrage is one of them. Another one is Tzolk'in. So Tzolk'in is definitely one of my favorite games. It's definitely one that looks like it's kind of like a gimmick, right? Like when you look at it, you're like, okay, it's got all these wheels. Okay, this is going to be gimmicky. But it turns out that like that mechanism in that, like the time mechanism in that game is like super tight. And as you get better at that game, like I would play on BGA, Board Game Arena. And like when I played that game at first, in person, like we did our things in the game, and we're like, oh yeah, getting corn's kind of hard, and like we get a little bit of corn and we'd score some like dinky amount of points. And I was like, yeah, this is pretty fun or whatever, but you know, like it didn't feel like we were doing all that much. It just felt like our workers were always, we were just spending all our corn on workers all the time. And then I like hopped on to BGA, where people had like, there were some people on there who had like thousands of plays. Yeah. And I played against some of those people on there, and I was just like, oh my goodness, like this is ridiculous. And then like it really opened my eye up to like how good that mechanism was in that game. And just how tight it is, and how you can block people off of entire wheels. And the game is way, way more feisty. Get better at it because you're not being choked out by like your own food requirements and things like that. You're now, instead of the wheels controlling you, you're controlling the wheels, right? And so that game I think is amazing, and that game's been around for a long time. So
quite a while, yeah. I
would say that there are a lot of really good heavy games that have been around for a while. And I feel like, I don't know if that's just for heavy games, but I feel like I notice it more with heavy games, is that there are usually a couple of good heavy games a year, and like those good heavy games a year will continue to be good for a long time. Like my number one favorite game is like Arkwright, right? And that game's been out for quite a bit now. And I don't suspect that game, I don't suspect someone's going to make something similar to Arkwright that's going to just say, like replace that for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Tzolk'in is another one. Like, I know that they put out new games in that series.
The T
right?
series. Yeah.
Yeah. But Tzolk'in still, to me, is by far the best one. And
I believe
just because it's so mean, and maybe I wouldn't have liked it as much had I not found it online. But like once my eyes got opened up to like how tight that game actually can be, and like in that game, one mistake against a good player, like it feels like chess or something. Like one mistake in that game on a good player, you're just like, oh, there goes the entire game. Right?
Yeah. So for people who aren't familiar with Tzolk'in, and I know Kirby hasn't seen Tzolk'in, I think it's the first game in like what we were defining as the T series. It's basically like all these ancient civilization games. Tzolk'in, there's Teotihuacan, there's Tekhenu.
I think I've seen the box.
Yeah, for Tzolk'in, there's one main wheel that is essentially spinning 4 other smaller wheels, and you are placing your worker on one of those 4 small wheels. In each turn, the big wheel is going to spin, which then turns the other ones. And based on how they are turning, wherever your worker is like indicated by like a resource or something that you're going to be getting. And as it spins like the worker stays on there longer, kind of like the better the reward will be.
Right.
And so you're placing your workers on these different wheels at different times, and the trick is really about timing it of when you're going to be pulling these workers off to get the best possible reward, so that you can buy, I believe, what is it, like the things at the bottom right that give you the points.
The various different buildings.
Yes. And so like what he's saying is you can really kind of block people from certain wheels or certain times, and because there's so like you have to wait a certain amount of rotations before you get it, and that like you're not going to be able to get it at a certain point when you really need it, and it's a lot of timing and making sure that, like you said, you don't accidentally miss a worker and they fall off or something, or you miss a certain reward that you need and you don't want it to pass up. And like you said, playing against a good player who really knows that timing and of it can be real punishing.
Right. And it's also amazing that it has such a simple mechanism, or what you do on a turn is so simple. So on your turn, like you said, you place as many workers as you want, or you pull as many workers as you want.
Yep.
So that is it. That is all your choices. So and you can't do a mixture. You can't do placing and pulling at the same time. So you either choose, I'm going to do a place action, and with that place action, you place as many as you want, or I'm going to do a pull action, and I'm going to pull as many as I want. So it's super, super simple as far as like that core underlying mechanism, and then them riding around. But then the emerging gameplay from that is spectacular. It's a very, very good game design, in my opinion.
Cool.
Absolutely. And like kind of on with the T games and time wheels, Tekhenu kind of has a little bit of that with that
it has the shadow.
Yeah, that shadow. It's basically like the obelisk. It's ancient Egypt, and essentially the essence is the sun is rotating around it, and the dice in each of the quadrants kind of get stronger or weaker based on how it's spinning. And obviously you just spin the little obelisk in the middle to represent where that sun is located, and kind of it's a lot of the timing aspect of when you take certain dice in which quadrant to do actions of the various different spaces around the board that have, like, based on different gods, they have different actions that you're doing. But I think I prefer Tzolk'in to Tekhenu. But have you played that one? Yeah,
I have not played Tekhenu. I have played Tzolk'in, and that was going in the wrong direction for me personally.
Interesting. Okay.
So I was like, okay, I'll just stick with the one that I like, and so I just stick with Tzolk'in. So I watched videos of Tekhenu. It doesn't look like it's moving in the direction that I would personally prefer. But I can definitely see why some folks would prefer that direction. I think it is doing more modern. Like, I don't know, like, it's all modern, right? Everything in board games is like in the past 10 years. So, but like it's more up to date and sort of like how mechanisms are being done. But I don't necessarily want more up to date always. Like, I kind of like it when it's meaner, and I like getting punished more. So these games that soften too much for me are not as interesting. I want to play a game to see who understood that game the best. And if that is not me, that's just as fine. I don't care if I win or not. But I do want to play the game to see who's the best, and or who understands the system the best. Not like who's personally the best, like who understood that system best. And like that's why I'll hop on BGA and I'll go against somebody who's played Tzolk'in 5,000 times, and he or she will absolutely wreck me. But like, I'm learning something about that system while playing them. Right, I'm learning new things, and unfortunately, like with that game, once you play online and then come back to an in-person group, then you can't play in person anymore. So you have to end up getting only into online for the game. But I really enjoy that game. Tzolk'in, that game.
Which I'm surprised with Teotihuacan. There's a lot of interesting systems that I find. Like, I think of the T games in that series, I like Teotihuacan the best. I really love the rondel system and the manipulation of the moving those dice around. And then there's a whole bunch of extra expansions that they have added to it, but I've really liked the rondel mechanic of the whole thing, and being able to create these interesting combos of moving up the track of the dead, or in the I forgot what the other side of the board, the different temple tracks, and then how like building up the tempo with the tiles feeds into then some of those other the other temple track, and I think it's
so I haven't sorry.
Go ahead.
So I haven't played Teotihuacan a whole lot of times. I played it I don't know, maybe 3-ish times. So I don't have the level of familiarity with it that I do with Tzolk'in. So there could be things that I'm not seeing. For sure. So that's a big caveat there. But for me, with Teo is when I sit down, I can plan out what I'm going to do for the entire game. And there wasn't much, at least that I could see in the base version that I played, that people could do to stop me from just executing my plan. And so, I would make the plan, and then playing the game was just executing that plan, and not me having to be agile or having to sort of think on my feet. And so, like, for me personally, I don't like executing plans that much. Like, once I already have solved or made my my plan, I don't really enjoy the process of doing it. It's why I don't like necessarily playing engine building games where the engine lasts too long. Right. So like, I want, like, once I've made my engine and I know how that engine is going to work, I want the game to give me a score that makes sense for that engine that I built. Don't make me spend 10 turns just doing that thing. But again, that's very personal preference. I definitely know people who want to go through and have the engine do the thing, and that's the satisfying part. And they want to go through the motions, right? But I personally just want to say, like, okay, I built this thing, doesn't work. It sort of reminds me of like Magic the Gathering. I shouldn't like diss Magic the Gathering too much, but I liked building the decks. And then I just wanted to see if the deck worked. I didn't really want to play the game.
That's fair.
Right? So like, if I could have just make the deck and then I could put it into some sort of algorithm, and that tells me, okay, you built a a 95 point deck here or something.
Yeah.
And that's a high quality deck.
Yeah.
I would be like, sweet. And then I would go in and go make another deck, right? Or I would do like a booster draft type thing, and you make a deck out of a booster draft, and then just evaluate what my deck is worth as far as like it's how good it is. Yeah. And then I'm good. Like, I don't want to play Magic, the game, right? I want to play the deck building part, right? Or the drafting part. Okay. It's the same thing sort of with Teo to me. It's like, once I've made my plan, I don't want to play the game itself. Yeah,
and I completely understand with Teo too. Can very much be that way. It's go with the strategy, figure out what you're going to kind of do. I think, and I haven't really played. Only Max has played kind of online against people who really know the game. Right. Maybe once you start knowing it, you can really start then not worrying as much about the Rendell and start thinking about blocking other players, right? And how they're going to be moving around the Rendell. Maybe, but you are right. It is going to be a lot of like plan a strategy and execute it the best you can. Maybe there's going to be some on the fly things, and I mean, for me, I guess that's why I like it so much. I like coming up with a plan and trying to execute it to the best that I can. Right. And so, yeah, I see where you're coming from. Is someone listening who knows how to do coding, get on like a deck build, like do a program that can rate decks that you build.
I would definitely buy it.
Have like tournaments of Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, whatever, like things, deck building tournaments for these games,
just rate the efficacy of a deck. That's it. Yeah.
Yep. No one ever plays. Right. Just builds the best deck.
Yep.
Either that, or else you should do like a team style thing. So you have one person who's the deck builder, and then you have someone who actually likes to play Magic, and they go and do the tournament part.
That's
so
perfect.
You've got team Magic the Gathering.
Perfect. And then the other one you mentioned a little bit, Barrage. We played Barrage a bit.
That's the game that I know. I don't know the other ones, but I do know Barrage, and I really enjoyed the wheel. I think the wheel makes the game really, really interesting, and there were some times where I was not thoughtful enough about the wheel. You know, you kind of get caught up doing other things, and you look back at your wheel, and you're like, great, can't do the thing that I wanted to do because I forgot about it. I lost track of it, so I thought it was interesting.
It's, for me, I wanted to feel a little bit more, well, it almost felt like a Trajan with the Mancala thing.
Sure.
I thought that Mancala thing was probably the most interesting aspect of the game. Right. And so I really I found the wheel in Barrage to be the most interesting, and I kind of had wished there was a bit more of it that you were doing.
Have you played the expansion for that one?
I don't think we have done the expansion, no.
Yeah, I think the expansion adds a decent amount, but Barrage is definitely a mixture of, you can see that came from other games.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So Barrage is like Terra Mystica or Gaia Project, right, mixed with this wheel mechanism. I guess we don't know, right? We don't know how the designer came up with it, but it looks very much like they borrowed these aspects from Terra Mystica. Yeah. But yeah, the expansion does add a little bit more oomph to it.
Okay.
I would agree. I don't think it's the heaviest game, but I do think it was the best game in 2019, and my own game was in there, right? So, yeah, that's another thing I guess about me is that I definitely don't think that my games are always the best. Like I know way too many designers are like, oh yeah, like mine's definitely the best. No, Barrage was definitely a better game than mine. Like there's a reason it's much more successful. So, yeah, if you were to pick two games to play, I would choose Barrage. That's that game is very good. But I do agree that the worker placement part maybe isn't as thinky as maybe you might want it to be. And there were some things, especially in the base game, like I would just run a strategy where I would ignore everything that everybody was doing and just work on building my engine up or whatever. And I was just getting points off of my player board constantly. And that was pretty successful. With the expansion, I think some of those strategies that seemed a little bit maybe stronger. And again, I've not played enough to make any like exact statements on, you know, what is the best strategy or what isn't. But for us, like when we moved into the expansion, it at least moved our groupthink into a, you know, a different space and added more different paths that you could take.
Okay.
As opposed to like in the base game, I was really doing mostly just empty my entire board, score points every single turn.
Yeah. Yeah.
And pretty much not even care what other people were doing, which is kind of sad for that game. If you're doing that, because you've got that cool centerpiece, right?
Yep.
With the water dropping down. Like if you're not paying attention to that at all or very little, that doesn't feel like the interaction that the game can provide.
Yeah. I mean, that is kind of half the game, is that whole aspect and the manipulation of
if
it.
you get to just ignore it,
Yeah.
right, then you're like, oh, you're like, I know I'm winning right now, but this is dumb.
Yeah, it seems that, yeah, maybe it's too powerful then, or that, yeah, I don't know. For to be able to ignore a full half of the game and still be a pretty viable.
Right.
I suspect
win.
that there were I suspect that there were counters that people could have done, but I don't think that we were, you know, like we had probably played, you know, half dozen times, so we probably just don't know what those counters are that could have stopped my approach of just ignoring everybody. But that's also usually my sort of style, is like I try to play in a way that people can't mess with me as much as possible. Yeah. And I just try to get off in my own little space, and maybe it's not even the best space, but like nobody's going to also be there with me. And I just try to score over there instead of just constantly getting blocked.
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember. Coloma also is a time wheel one, isn't it? Played it a little bit ago. Have you played Coloma?
No.
Nope. Yeah, it's
maybe we should switch the tile layers.
Yeah, it does have a bit of a time wheel. It's not so much like an individual. It's going to be more. It's a single wheel that's moving around each round, and it kind of it's what it's doing is making certain actions in that round stronger, and moving around. It was been a couple months since we played, so I'm just trying to like remember back to it. I know so there's a worker placement where you're placing your workers on this time wheel, but the time wheel moves and makes it so that certain secondary actions potentially will get blocked off depending on where that time wheel is located. The game was a little bit underwhelming. I know people have really liked it. I found it a bit underwhelming. The time wheel action just didn't really. It wasn't as exciting as I thought it was going to be, but
yeah, there aren't that many games I don't think that have this spinning wheel. I think Glass Door is another one that has some amount of a spinning wheel. What's it called? Brussels. Maybe
which
that
one?
has like the clock handles or whatever moving, and you can only get stuff inside of in between the two spokes or whatever. And so there are some out there, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's the most like prolific mechanism. It's not one that's used a whole lot. I don't know if that is production wise, like it's harder to do. Like maybe there's just ways that maybe you can do a lot of those types of things with just a rondelle, and then you don't have to build that spinny part, which might cost more to make. I'm not certain why it's not a more popular mechanism, but yeah, it's certainly not as popular as tile laying. Everybody's done tile laying.
That's true. Yeah.
And anybody can design a tile layer game. So like that's a nice easy mechanism.
Have you played Praga Caput Regni?
I have not played that one yet. That one also has a spinny thing.
Yeah, that one has a spinny thing. That's right. That's
the name of the mechanism, spinny thing.
The spinny thing. That's what our title is going to be, the spinny thing games. It has, so it's like at the top of the board, all the tile actions basically. It's just the tiles are just your actions. They're like
Right.
they all get slotted into the wheel, and as you like spin it, certain actions will kind of like cost less, and it like the farther back on the wheel it is, maybe it costs more to actually do that action. And so when you
Right.
take that action, it goes to like the very top, the end of the wheel, and it'll just keep spinning each turn. And the longer an action hasn't been taken, there's potential for like you gain extra money for taking this action because it hasn't been used in a
Right.
while. That game was a lot of fun. There is a lot going on, and
Yeah.
it is a very much plan out your game and kind of execute it. Yeah, you're
Right.
gonna have a little bit of player interaction and like having to think on the fly with maybe someone taking an action and maybe making it more expensive, but that just comes down to the Tewa kind of thing where your action, like you can maybe block someone from a certain action by placing your dice there.
Right.
But for the most part, you're pretty much playing your own game
Right.
with progress.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't want to act like that's a thing that people shouldn't enjoy, or even that I don't enjoy either. Like,
Mhm.
depending on how long the game is going to run, also I have a higher tolerance for that too, right?
Mhm.
So if the game is a relatively short game, I personally do enjoy the executing of it. I just if I get stuck in a game, especially like if I don't, if I'm playing at like a meetup or something and I don't necessarily know who I'm playing against,
Mhm.
right? And I get stuck in like a 3-hour game of executing my plan that I made 3 hours ago. That's where I sort of get a little lost.
Sure.
I'll start thinking about something else. I'm not really present.
Mhm. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, so I guess your big suggestion would say play to Tzolk'in for the
Yeah,
for
play
the time.
Tzolk'in, play Barrage.
Mm-hmm.
Play Barrage, whatever it is.
Don't play Pipeline expansion if you don't like Pipeline. It's not going to make it better for you.
Yes. Well, it's about time to wrap up this episode. So I just want to say thanks again for joining us, Ryan. It was a
Yep, thanks
pleasure.
for having me again.
Yeah.
Lots
Nice
of fun.
to meet you.
Yeah.
I'm looking
you
forward
too.
to playing Pipeline and then playing the expansion once I know how to play Pipeline.
We've thrown her into the deep end of some pretty heavy games, so I'm sure she can handle getting into Pipeline.
Well, if someone's going to force you to play, you can play with the expansion, and there's not any more rules overhead, so it's actually not going to be much harder for you to learn.
Cool.
Though I would say don't do the increasing refinements as a first-time player, but the other parts you could certainly do. But you will not. I don't think you'll progress in the game as fast. So there are patterns that you can build if you play the base game over and over again that you will learn. With the expansion, those patterns
They go away.
that you can those go-to patterns sort of don't exist anymore,
Gotcha.
and so you will not improve as fast. I don't think. But if you're playing with a bunch of people who've played before, you can watch what they're doing and then probably improve faster anyways.
That's usually what I do.
Yeah. So obviously we talked a lot about the expansion, so make sure to check it out. It's for pre-order at Capstone. And obviously that second expansion sometime, who knows when, but there will be one. there will be one. There will be a second expansion. And it was what did you say? Bear
Raid.
Bear Raid.
The Kickstarter is already completed, but have a look out for that.
You said by Christmas, maybe?
That's what they say. I'm going to say lie.
Okay.
I'm going to say with mostly false is
Call
going to
him
be
shenanigans.
my
Okay.
fact checker on that. I mean, from my side, yes, I'm done. But again, just based off of things that I've seen with games in the past, rarely does it seem like things come in on time.
Right. So other than those to check out, is there anything else you want to let people know about?
Of my own stuff or other people's stuff?
I mean, I guess you could plug someone else's stuff by all means, but
All right, I'll plug somebody else's stuff. So Tim, who has been helping me with development on the pipe related games. He has a drawing game that he's been working on. And basically, when you are drawing, you have to draw everything in straight lines. So you have to use straight lines, and every line that you draw is an action. And so you get restricted both on not ever being allowed to do a curve, and also on each stroke that you make being an action. And so you have these like really abstracty, like symbolic sort of ideas of what you're trying to draw. It ends up being a really pretty fun party game. So I would say keep an eye out for that. He sometimes does online play testing, where he'll sometimes post pictures of some of the drawings that people do, and then you can try to make your guess or whatever of like, what do you think this person was trying to draw from a game that he did in person or something like that. He'll take photos of that. So keep an eye out for that. That's a pretty fun party game coming out from Tim Kaiser.
Cool.
What's the name of it?
Unnamed, I think, at this point.
Unnamed at this point.
We always have like development names for things. I don't know what the development name is. This might be just like Line or something, like something stupid. It's something that it won't be able to be published as something that plain, I don't think.
Okay.
Cool.
And is it going to just be just a simple pre-order, or is it going to do a Kickstarter? How can people find?
We are not at that, or I don't know why I'm saying we. He is not at that point.
Okay.
Right? So at this point, he is still testing things.
Okay.
He's working on right now coming up with a card set, right, of words, sort of like the Pictionary style thing. But like you can't just use Pictionary words, because in Pictionary, some of those words, some things are very easy to draw with curves. That are not so easy to draw with just straight lines.
Sure.
So like, for instance, there's one word in this game that's rock, right? So a rock is a very simple object, but it's really hard to draw in this game and get people to actually guess rock. So it's one of those funny things where you're sitting there and you're the drawer, you're like, this is ridiculous. Like, how do I get people to guess the word rock here with my straight lines? And so you have to think outside the box and think about like, how do I put a rock in some other sort of setting or whatever, and still use a minimal number of straight lines to do it, and get people to guess that way. So a lot of creative thinking involved in that game. I do really like that style of game. Games like the word games like Letter Jam, Code Names, like these drawing types games where you have to think outside the box and how you are going to represent things. And interpret them. So it's a pretty fun one, and come in play tested if you get the chance.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. Have a look out for that. The emerging markets at Capstone. And the hiking one.
Well, that one
is
to be determined.
To be determined.
Yeah.
Spring 2022.
There we go.
Spring 2022. Okay. We'll have a look out for that then. Sounds good. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thanks again for having me.
Until next time, everyone. We'll see you later.
Goodbye.
Bye.